welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Here's a look at what's lined up for you on the show tonight. Our cover story tonight is about the Dalai Lama's successor. It is a story of succession that the Chinese President Xi Jinping holds very close to his heart. Has the Dalai Lama chosen his successor? We tell you tonight about a delegation of Mongolian monks, a ceremony in Dharamshala, and a 7-year-old boy. Will he be the next Dalai Lama? Has the Dalai Lama chosen his successor? We discuss what we know so far and look at why the answers to these questions matter so much to Beijing. Why is China so worked up about the latest developments? This and more coming up on our cover story tonight. Also on the show for you, another development has left China worried. China's billionaire population has come down. We tell you what lies behind this latest setback for the country. Israel's new law aims to save Benjamin Netanyahu while, in a way, destroying the country. People say the clock is ticking to save the country's democracy. We tell you what's happening. Immigration has been fueling Canada's population growth. We get you the latest numbers and look at the bigger picture. Are you an employee influencer? What are they? And are you a part of a growing debate over whether this is the next challenge after moonlighting? We discuss. Has the Dalai Lama chosen his successor? This question is buzzing in the city of Dharamshala, the virtual capital of the Dalai Lama and Tibet's government in exile. It is the official residence of the Dalai Lama, the supreme leader of Tibetan Buddhism, who dominates the cityscape. He has been living in exile here since 1960. And all of a sudden, this peaceful haven is astir as observers ponder over whether one of the great decisions in the history of Tibetan Buddhism has been made. Has the Dalai Lama named his successor? Have a look at this report. It was carried by the Times UK. It says, on the 8th of March, a delegation of 600 Mongolian monks attended a ceremony in Dharamshala, and present among them was a 7-year-old boy. In one image from the ceremony, he is being felicitated by the Dalai Lama. In another image, the Dalai Lama is seen assisting him in playing the Tibetan singing bowl. These images have led to speculation. Speculation over who this boy really is. Now, here's what we know so far. The boy's formal title is the 10th Khalka Jetsun Dhampa Rinpoche. In the hierarchy of Tibetan Buddhism, he is supposed to be the 3rd most senior Lama and the head of the Buddhist faith in Mongolia. He was reportedly born in 2015 in the United States and possesses dual nationality. He is one of a pair of twin boys named Agudai and Ashultai. There is no clarity on which one came to Dharamshala. The boy's father is a mathematics professor at the National University of Mongolia. His mother is a businesswoman. His grandmother is a former member of Mongolia's parliament. This family is apparently a long-standing patron of one of Mongolia's biggest monasteries. In 2016, when the Dalai Lama visited Mongolia, he had made a crucial announcement. Addressing a gathering, he had said that the Jetsun Tampa had been reincarnated and that the search was on to find him. Turns out, this is the boy he was talking about. The question is, could he be the next Dalai Lama? Could he be the next spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism? Well, here's what we can tell you. Back in Mongolia, this ceremony has provoked a lot of excitement. Mongolians are celebrating the anointment of one of their own as the third senior-most Lama. They say this sets the stage for the boy to succeed the Dalai Lama. But last we checked, that is not how Tibetan Buddhism works. Tibetan Buddhists from the Gelug tradition believe that the Dalai Lama can reincarnate, that he has control over his rebirth and can even choose the body in which he will be reincarnated. So the anointment of this boy could just be a kind of rehearsal for the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. It does not have to mean that he is the next successor. Also, there has been a growing demand that the Dalai Lama name his successor to preempt the Chinese-controlled monks to name one after the Dalai Lama's death, creating a schism. The history and functioning of Tibetan Buddhism offers a more complex picture. I'll start from 1933. That's when the previous Dalai Lama died. But instead of exiting the circle of life and death, he is said to have been reborn into a new body as Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama. He came from a family of peasants, was born a year after the 13th died and was ordained at the age of 3. That is 4 years after the 13th Dalai Lama passed away. 8 decades since this coronation, the Dalai Lama's age is advancing. He will turn 88 in July this year. He is still in good health, yes, but the question of who will succeed him has become one which is more pressing than ever. So how will this succession happen really? Well, a key person responsible for finding the child who will be the Dalai Lama is known as the Panchen Lama, the second most important figure in Tibetan Buddhism. And interestingly, it is the Dalai Lama who appoints the Panchen Lama. The current Dalai Lama chose this 6-year-old boy, Gedun Choeki Nema, as the Panchen Lama. This was in May 1995. And this is where things turn murky because this boy has not been seen for the last 26 years. What happened to him? Well, he was kidnapped by the Chinese regime. That's right. China kidnapped a 6-year-old. It rejected his appointment, took the boy into custody and appointed its own Panchen Lama through a lottery. Just look at how bizarre this is. China counterfeited a religious figure. They want to do the same with the next Dalai Lama. They want to appoint a candidate who kowtows to Beijing and the Communist Party. The present Dalai Lama says he will not let that happen.
Final authority is myself, no one else. And obviously, not Chinese communist.
So who is it going to be? Well, the Dalai Lama has floated a number of options, a number of scenarios for his reincarnation. Number 1, picking a new successor in India, where he has lived all his life. He has often stated it himself that he should be reincarnated in India. The second option is the idea of a woman taking over the role. The Dalai Lama once said that if the circumstances require a female Dalai Lama it will be. But he also said that she should be attractive, a statement that he later apologized for, calling it a joke lost in translation. And the third and final scenario is that he will not reincarnate at all. He believes the tradition should cease because there is no guarantee that, and I'm quoting, some stupid Dalai Lama will not come next who will disgrace himself or herself. Those were the exact words spoken. Now, whatever happens, the broad consensus is that China should have no role to play in the Dalai Lama's reincarnation/succession. And this has become an international political issue now. The US Congress has even passed an act, the Tibetan Policy and Support Act, which reaffirms the right of Tibetans to choose the next Dalai Lama. But at the same time, the question is, why should China respect an American law? But does China respect any law? Does China respect the present Dalai Lama? The answer is no. In fact, its spokespersons routinely denigrate the present Dalai Lama. For them, Tibet and its Buddhism is a political game, not a holy religion. The communists, after all, are atheists who dismiss religion as the opium of the people. China conquered Tibet through force and for 7 decades has suppressed the Tibetan people and their religion. China wants a puppet, not a spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhists. On the other hand, there is India. India has protected Tibetan Buddhists. It has offered a sanctuary where Tibetan culture has thrived, a country the Dalai Lama calls home. So has the Dalai Lama brought the Mongolian child to India to pave the way for a different kind of succession? That is what the buzz is all about. In India, this child will be safe and ready for the moment when it comes. It is both a religious conundrum and a geopolitical battle. The question is, who will ultimately win this battle? Well, if only there was a prophecy that could tell us the outcome. And speaking of prophecies, here's one that no one could have ever made. The Islamic world's abandonment of Pakistan. You heard that right. After Saudi Arabia's refusal to bail out Pakistan, another Islamic country has snubbed Islamabad. I am talking about Kuwait, another dear friend of Pakistan. Well, guess what? This dear friend is pushing Pakistan to pay its dues, insisting on immediate payment of diesel purchase. Let me break this down for you. Since 2000, Pakistan and Kuwait signed a contract for credit line facility for the supply of diesel to Pakistan. Under this contract, Pakistan has imported diesel worth millions in the last 20 years. Most of these payments were made in installments from time to time. And Kuwait wants to change that. It wants Islamabad to make the payment right at the time of purchase. Also clear its previous dues as soon as possible. And how much are the dues? Well, last we checked, payment of an amount of $55 million is due for an import made on the 10th of February. Another $10 million is due for an import made on the 20th of February. And yet another $55 million are due for an import made on the 15th of March. Now, Kuwait wants this money immediately. The request was made back in January. Pakistan tried working on a war footing to fulfill the request. But given the financial mess that it is in, it was unable to do the needful. And now it has been forced to take desperate steps like these. Have a look at this headline. On Tuesday, the Economic Coordination Committee of Pakistan's cabinet approved the supplementary grant of 27 billion rupees to avert the looming default on diesel purchase. This move may solve problems in the short term, but you see, in the long term, it might create problems for Pakistan. Problems in keeping the overall expenses within the limits agreed by the IMF. But that's not the only point here. The point here is how one after the other, Islamic countries, countries that Pakistan calls its friend, are not helping it when it needs help the most. We told you earlier about Saudi Arabia. On Tuesday, this report was released. It said Saudi Arabia is no longer willing to bail out Islamabad. It has refused to provide any more interest-free loans. The country's finance minister said that it does not want to give grants without any strings attached. That Saudi Arabia is taxing its people and it expects Pakistan to do the same, to fix its mess on its own. So first it was Saudi Arabia and now it's Kuwait. How should we be viewing these developments? What exactly do they indicate? What is the messaging here? Is the Islamic world disassociating itself from Pakistan? Has it come to realize that Pakistan is indeed what others say it is? A lost cause? Whatever be the case, this is highly embarrassing once again for Pakistan. You see, 2 years back, it was trying to portray itself as the biggest activist of the Islamic world. Its then Prime Minister Imran Khan was going to one Islamic country after another, beating the drum of unity, brotherhood. And just 2 years on, the same Pakistan is being ignored by Islamic countries. This is a major blow to Pakistan's diplomacy. That is assuming there is any diplomacy left. If Islamic countries are not helping Pakistan, why would the rest of the world do that? This is the argument many analysts are making. And that, by the way, is not the only aspect of our Pakistan story tonight. As the country faces diplomatic embarrassments on the world stage, back at home, high-ranking Pakistani officials are losing their lives. And in the latest instance, a Pakistani intelligence official has been killed in northwestern Pakistan. His name was Brigadier Mustafa Kamal. He used to work for Pakistan's rogue spy agency, the Inter-Services Intelligence, or the ISI. Reports say he died in an encounter in South Waziristan. His team was ambushed by a group of terrorists. From Pakistan's point of view, that is a big loss, because this man was a key player when it comes to intel operations. He was apparently involved in neutralizing the terror network behind the 2016 attack on the Army Public School in Peshawar. And the immediate question is, who was behind his killing? Was it the Tehreek-e-Taliban or some other terror group? Well, there is no clarity on that front yet. No group has claimed responsibility as of now, but this episode is very striking. It tells you how the resurgence of terror in Pakistan is not just claiming the lives of civilians, but also of Pakistan's officials. And we have been telling you this for a while now. China has been cracking down on its billionaires. A faltering economy, sliding stocks, and a depreciating yuan have hit the country's super rich harder than ever. And the results are out in the open now. The Hurun Global Rich List for 2023 is out. Take a look. It says the world is down 269 billionaires, and this has happened only twice in the last 10 years. But China has suffered the biggest blow. It has lost 229 of its billionaires, which means 51% of Chinese elite are no longer in the billionaire club. Their net worth has plummeted by 15%. Alibaba Group founder Jack Ma dropped to the 52nd place in the rich list. He was ranked 34 the previous year. The country's yuan lost about 8% of its value against a surging dollar. This was the biggest annual drop since 1994. And for China's richest billionaires, last year was the worst in decades. And why is that? Because President Xi Jinping is his country's own enemy. The number one reason was his stringent COVID-19 restriction. The zero COVID policy, it throttled China's economy. And as if that wasn't enough, the CCP tightened scrutiny on private enterprises. It launched a common prosperity campaign. Tech moguls were urged to donate billions of dollars to philanthropy. And China began its clampdown on the tech sector in the year 2020. You see, internet companies found themselves in regulatory crosshairs. A&T Group's high-profile public offering in Shanghai and Hong Kong was suspended. Alibaba was handed a $3.7 billion fine for monopolistic practices. Didi, a leading ride-hailing company in China, had its app banned. Why was that? For suspected violation of cybersecurity laws. It lost more than 80% of its IPO value. Meituan, a major food delivery platform, was targeted with an antitrust probe. It was fined more than $530 million. China used several reasons to restrict its tech giants' activities to impose the fines. But why did China crack down on its homegrown successful tech firms? Well, to push for what it calls common prosperity. Do you remember this? Xi Jinping vowed to adjust excessive incomes of the super rich. His move was supposed to reduce income disparity, to narrow down the gap between the rich and the poor. But it seems more about concentrating political power and ideological control, while blaming the rich and famous for the country's ills. Because Xi Jinping has targeted the entertainment sector as well. Entertainers and entrepreneurs have cult-like followings in the country, and over the last few decades, their wealth has grown exponentially. Celebrity fan clubs became networks of mass mobilization. Millions of members support their idols online with clicks and money. And of course, it came under the CCP's radar. In fact, China's broadcast regulator limited entertainers' salaries, cracked down on fandom culture, and banned film stars with different political ideologies. Several actors were fined, others were banned, and some disappeared altogether. And China also upended one of its most lucrative sectors in the year 2021. It announced a sweeping ban on profit-based after-school tutoring. It accused tutoring institutes of causing unnecessary stress to young children. But was that the real reason? The industry was worth over $150 billion, and regulators slammed it for being hijacked by the capital. You see, Western countries try to promote growth. They create an environment in which the rich can flourish. But that is not the case in China. The country targets its own riches, even at the expense of its economy. China's GDP expanded only 3% in 2022. It was one of its slowest growth in decades. It fell far below China's official target of 5.5%. Xi Jinping's anti-capitalist remarks have spooked billionaires. Their disappearances have become a common feat. Many are actively seeking to move out of the country altogether. What would it spell for China's economy? And from that, we want to focus on a leader who is related to a family of billionaires. Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. He has revealed his personal tax details, and questions are being raised over what took the leader so long to reveal these details. To what extent do they really get us the full picture? And what about his wife's tax details? Our next report getting you the complete story.
After months of promising to release his tax returns, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak decided to publish the details just when Boris Johnson's Partygate row grilling has kept the world distracted. So what do his tax returns show?
Well, I published my tax returns because I said I would in the interest of transparency, and I'm glad to have done that. Now, I think ultimately what people are interested in is what I'm going to do for them. And, you talk about the cost of living. Of course, that's the number one priority that I've got, that I'm grappling with.
The UK PM has made nearly $6 million in the past 3 years. Most of this is through gains from his US investment fund. Such massive gains might come as a shock, because the Prime Minister's salary is only about $500,000. The rest of the earnings come simply from interest, dividends and capital gains from his US-based investments. But what are these US investment funds? Sunak's accountants say the investments are held under a blind management arrangement. The income this arrangement generates comes from only a single US-based investment fund. This has come under intense scrutiny as the tax statement offers no details of the fund's contents. And Sunak is known to have been party to several highly market-sensitive discussions. The tax system, which was designed by successive Tory governments, allows the PM to pay a lower tax rate than the ordinary working class. The tax system, which was designed by successive Tory governments, allows the Prime Minister to pay a lower tax rate than the ordinary working class, which is facing the highest tax burden in 70 years. While families are struggling to keep the lights on in their homes, Sunak's revelations have triggered a series of questions. Although his tax details came after months of delay, his wife's tax returns are still not out. This after his wife, Akshata Murthy, was criticized over her non-domicile status. As a non-domicile resident, she is not required to pay UK taxes on her overseas income. Reports say she would have dodged over $2.4 million in taxes in a year through her non-domicile status. But who can claim a non-domicile status? A person who lives in the UK but declares their permanent residence in another country can opt for such a status. It has also emerged that Murthy pays nearly $36,000 a year to maintain her non-domicile status. After marrying into one of India's richest families, Sunak's personal wealth has been a sensitive issue. He's built an empire out of his multiple homes. He has a manor house with a private lake and heated pool worth over $1.8 million, a 5-bedroom townhouse in South Kensington bought for over $5.5 million. The millionaire also has a couple of flats and penthouses in parts of the UK. Sunak came out with the tax details after questions were raised over his and his family's tax affairs. But will these revelations make matters worse for him? We'll have to wait and see.
And our next story comes from Israel. Before I tell you more about it, I want you to take a look at these images. That was a symbolic hourglass that was put up by the protesters in Tel Aviv. Why is that? To deliver a strong message. They say that time is running out for Israeli democracy. Nationwide protests marked a day of paralysis. In fact, demonstrations have rocked the country for weeks now. Judicial reforms planned by Benjamin Netanyahu, and amid this unrest, the Israeli parliament has passed a law which will save Netanyahu from the chaos and might just destroy Israel. What exactly is this new law all about? As part of the controversial judicial overhaul, the parliament has majorly limited the ways in which a prime minister can be deemed unfit for office, which means only the prime minister or the cabinet with a 2/3 majority can declare a leader unfit. The law also states that the government will only unseat a prime minister when they face a physical or mental incapacity. But what if the people file a request for the prime minister to step down? That will also not be entertained, as it prevents the Supreme Court from considering such requests. And this new move is part of a broader set of changes which include giving the government control over the appointment of judges and limiting the top court's ability to strike down laws. It has been pretty clear to the opposition parties for a while now that this new move, the new law, aims to protect Netanyahu as he faces an ongoing corruption trial. The Israeli Prime Minister, remember, is on trial for charges of fraud, breach of trust and bribery. He has dismissed the charges, calling them a politically motivated witch hunt. So what is the opposition doing? It has announced plans to challenge the law in the top court. In fact, former Prime Minister Yair Lapid has called it a disgraceful and corrupt personalized law, highlighting the fact that Netanyahu is just looking out for himself while the cost of living soars and people are out on the streets protesting for months now. And the protesters have had it up to the brim. They are not only expressing their anger against Benjamin Netanyahu, but also his wife. Remember, earlier this month, Sarah Netanyahu was also in the eye of the storm. You know where she was when Israel was witnessing protests on what was being called a day of disruption? At a salon in Tel Aviv, getting her hair done. According to reports, a client at the salon posted a selfie with Sarah Netanyahu, and within minutes, hundreds of protesters laid siege to the parlor. The anger was palpable. Demonstrators outside the salon chanted, "Shame, shame," and the country is burning and Sarah is getting a haircut. That's what they said. And in an attempt to convince the people, government officials have said that the new changes are what the country needs. But critics can see right through the government's words. They call Netanyahu's moves a fundamental threat to the country's checks and balances. The reforms are capable of evaporating minority protection, fostering corruption, and damaging the country's economy. It's been 3 months since the protest started, and now Netanyahu virtually has a ticket to stay as prime minister for life. Where do things go from here? We will be keeping a close eye. Let's now talk about what's happening in Canada. The country's population grew at a record pace in 2022. There was an increase of over 1 million new people, and this was almost completely because of immigration into the country. Our next report getting you the complete story.
For the first time ever, Canada's population has grown by more than 1 million people in a year. Canada's population growth rate of 2.7% in 2022 puts it among the top 20 in the world. Almost all countries with a higher pace of population growth were in Africa. Canada is leading the G7 countries as far as population growth is concerned. You know what this means for the country in the longer run? If the current trend continues, the growth rate will mean Canada will double in size by the middle of this century. So, what's behind this jump in population numbers? Immigration is a major reason. According to the data by Statistics Canada, this is happening largely due to the increase in immigration. Basically, the government's efforts to recruit migrants to ease labor shortages. In 2022, Canada welcomed 437,180 immigrants. It had a net rise of 607,782 non-permanent residents. According to the report, both of these numbers represent the highest levels on record, reflecting higher immigration targets and a record-breaking year for the processing of immigration applications. International migration accounted for nearly 96% of the population growth. Since coming to power in 2015, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been trying to attract more immigrants to the country. Just last year, the government announced a plan to welcome 500,000 immigrants a year by 2025. The country has been looking at immigration as a way out of the crisis left behind, as a result of the aging baby boomers leaving the workforce. The 2.7% annual population growth rate is Canada's highest since 1957. The earlier record was the result of the post-war baby boom, along with the high immigration of refugees because of the Hungarian Revolution of 1956. If Canada maintains current trends, that is, the 2.7% increase each year, its population would double in 26 years. But this also comes with challenges. The rise in number of permanent and temporary immigrants could mean additional hurdles for some parts of the country, in the areas of infrastructure, housing, and transportation. Earlier, a poll indicated that a vast majority of Canadians are concerned about how the government's plan to increase immigration levels will impact housing and government services, like a lot of countries in the West. Canada has an aging population with a lower birth rate, which means it has to bring in immigrants in order to grow. What makes it stand out is its focus on economic immigration. Around 50% of its permanent residents are shown the red carpet, not under family reunification, but as a result of their skills.
Let's now shift our focus to India. The Jammu and Kashmir police saying that for the first time in 3 decades, the number of terrorists in the valley has been brought down to 28. The security forces say that just 28 local terrorists are active in the Kashmir Valley. Our next report by our correspondent Idris Lone, getting you more details.
Jammu and Kashmir police, along with other security agencies, claim to have successfully managed to bring down the terrorist numbers drastically across the Kashmir region. The insurgency started in the early 1990s, and since then, the number has always been in the hundreds. Now, the J&K police claim that the number of active terrorists has been brought down to 28.
I feel happy to inform you that the number of local active terrorists has come down to an all-time low at 28, and we will bring it further down in coming days. All those who have given shelter or support to terrorists in the past, action will be taken against them according to law.
The police, National Investigation Agency and State Investigation Agency have intensified anti-terror operations across Kashmir Valley to break the terror ecosystems. In the last few weeks, hundreds of properties of alleged terrorists and those allegedly harboring terrorists have been seized by security agencies. The houses, which according to officials give shelter to terrorists, have also been seized in hundreds in the past few months.
The ecosystem of terrorists is being destroyed at every level. If an encounter took place in any residential house and the house owners were found harboring terrorists, we would arrest and book them in UAPA. At the same time, we would seize those properties. The number of such properties are going up as we initiate action in those encounter cases too, which happened in the last 5 years.
A few months ago, the police said that the number of terrorists had come down to 2 digits, that is 90. Now, after joint action by Jammu and Kashmir police, army, paramilitary forces and central and state agencies like NIA, ED and SIA, the number of terrorists active are only 28. The authorities claim that besides neutralizing and arresting allegedly active terrorists, the security forces have also succeeded in curbing the new recruitment to their ranks, which has helped to bring down the numbers.
According to Jammu and Kashmir police, the anti-militant operations across the Kashmir region have been intensified, leading to an all-time lowest number of active militants in the region. The number stands at 28, and now Jammu and Kashmir police says their focus this year will not only be militants but also the militant sympathizers. With video journalist Feroz, Idris Lone for WION World is One.
Let me now ask you a question. Do you love creating content on social media platforms? How do you spend your time over the weekends? Trying to click the perfect pictures, filming videos perhaps, editing them with trending audio notes, devising an effective marketing strategy perhaps, hopping onto every TikTok trend, waiting for that one reel to go viral to become an internet sensation overnight. It might be a guilty pleasure for you, but for some, it might be an alternate career plan. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. During the Wuhan virus pandemic, when everyone was stuck inside their homes, a lot of new social media accounts popped up. A lot of people made something out of their hobbies, posting their art on Instagram, book reviews, glitzy outfits, even makeup tutorials, recipes, of course. And how can we forget Dalgona coffee? People found a creative outlet at a time when most were working from home, saving time on commute, enjoying flexible working hours. And since people had so much time in their hands, moonlighting became all the rage. The debate over moonlighting took center stage. But what about those who made social media their side hustle? People who were resiliently growing their handles on social media platforms, gaining followers and engagement, with hopes to be able to monetize it one day. Such employees are gaining attention now. The rise of social media influencing has opened up avenues for employees. They see it as a way to earn quick bucks while maintaining their normal job routines. In fact, many see their jobs as a launching pad, as a way to put food on the table as they hustle for a social media presence on the side. Could this be the next big challenge for India Inc.? The influencer marketing industry seems promising. The Influencer Marketing Report 2022, in fact, the industry is estimated to grow at an annual rate of 25% over the next 5 years. Currently, it is valued at $16.4 billion, and it is set to reach $21.1 billion by the end of this fiscal year. Earlier, influencers only received free products for promoting items, but it has become a growing business over the years. 42% influencers now get paid instead of getting freebies. And their income varies depending on the country, the sponsors and the followers. Users with less than 10,000 followers make around $88 per post. Those with a larger following earn much more, up to $200 for every post. You see, this is why this sector seems so enticing. You get to work as per your own convenience, only a few hours every day. You are your own boss. You create the content that you like and you get paid handsomely for it. There is no denying that the work requires a lot of effort, but many are willing to choose that over dead-end jobs. Building a social media presence takes time. Earnings are meager initially. A majority of people pursue it with their stable jobs. And here comes the tricky part. If employees are earning money outside their full-time jobs, they need to disclose this to their employer, as it may lead to a conflict of interest. However, employees turned influencers are technically not employed by any other organization. So, in a way, they are not really obligated to disclose this. Employment contracts don't include any such clause specifically. So, is it about time that they do? Employees are obviously going to spend hours creating content, but what if it affects their work ethics, their attention, their productivity could be taking a hit? Damaging brand reputation could be another risk. What if, as an influencer, they promote a competitor's product? So where do we go from here? Should employees disclose their influencing projects during hiring? Should their brand be aligned with their employer's value and reputation? They do represent the company after all. Or is this too much to ask for? Time now to tell you what else made news around the world. Time for Gravitas Global Headlines.
The US Central Bank raises rates for the 9th straight time by a quarter percentage points, despite fears that the move could add to financial turmoil after a string of bank failures. The Ukraine army commander has vowed a counteroffensive against Russian forces in Bakhmut, saying Ukraine could take advantage of the Russian fatigue in the war-ravaged town. The White House's national security spokesperson says he believes attacks on the Nord Stream pipelines were acts of sabotage.
We still do believe it was an act of sabotage.
The Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines connecting Russia and Germany under the Baltic Sea were hit by a series of unexplained explosions last September. Moscow calls it an act of international terrorism. The United States strongly denies any involvement in the Nord Stream blasts. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen informs lawmakers that the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was not considering providing blanket insurance for banking deposits. This comes after the collapse of 2 prominent U.S. banks this month. Yellen said that banks nationwide were worried about the contagion effect from the bank failure. She added that President Joe Biden's administration was focused on stabilizing the banking system. An Australian senator has claimed she was assaulted by police at a rally in Canberra. This has prompted an official review. Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe was brought to the ground during an altercation with officers at an anti-trans event. Thorpe was part of a counter-protest. The Australian Federal Police said it was aware of the matter, while adding that the matter was under investigation. Protests continued in Paris over President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms, which aim to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Clashes between police and demonstrators have been on the rise in the past few days, but President Emmanuel Macron is resisting growing discontent on the streets of France. Tornado in the Southern California town of Montebello wreaked havoc on Wednesday night. It left cars with smashed windows and damaged commercial buildings. The storm marks the 12th atmospheric river since December to sweep the U.S. West Coast. Experts say the erratic weather is a result of human-induced climate change. The world's first 3D printed rocket launches successfully marks a step forward for the California company behind the innovative spacecraft, though it fails to reach orbit. Nikat Zareen is 1 win away from being a 2-time world champion across 2 different weights. The 26-year-old beat 2016 Olympic medalist Ingrid Valencia 5-0 in the 50-kilogram final. Commonwealth Games gold medalist Neetu Gangas has reached the final of the 48-kilogram flyweight category. European football's governing body, UEFA, is all set to launch an investigation against the current La Liga leaders over the referee payment scandal. Prosecutors allege that Barcelona paid millions of dollars to former vice president of the referees committee, Jose Maria Enriquez Negreira.
And on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas tonight. We are leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.